So let's take a look at defining the objective in scope. To do this, we're going to use a strategy map, the best practice in identifying strategic objectives and scope. So again, grab the mag on strategy mapping. The basic concept is a strategy map is a visual representation of your strategy showing the cause and effect relationship between the strategic objectives and their relative priority. Typically in the private sector, the topmost objective, the end point, is some financial gains. To get that, you have to make your customers happy. To satisfy your customers' needs, you need the right internal processes and projects, and to make those work, we need the right enablers: competency, culture, and enabling structures. In the public sector, we just take that financial perspective and move it right to the bottom, and everything else moves up a level. So now in the public sector, the topmost objective is customer, or we typically rename that into stakeholder. For a strategy map for a typical organization, this is sort of a generic strategy map. Maybe our overall financial objective is to drive revenue. To do that, there's a couple of things we need to do: become a supplier of choice and help reduce our costs. To become a supplier of choice, there's three things we need to do: deliver great value to our customers, continually improve our operations, and finally ensure effective pricing. And if we continually improve our operations, that will also both support our ability to create better value and our ability to ensure effective pricing. Underneath this, and continually improve our operations will also support reducing cost, of course. To improve our operations, there's a couple of things we need to do: continually innovate and pursue customer intimacy. And in fact, if we pursue the customer intimacy, that will also tell us where we need to innovate, all of which support improving our operations. Underpinning that are objectives like invest in our people, build a friendly culture, and leverage technology. So this is a strategy map that tells us our overall objectives. We then need to weight that. How important are these objectives for our organization this year? The reason the weighting is important is if we're going to be doing scenario planning, in this example, we probably don't need to spend a lot of time scenario planning around driving revenue. We should focus on the higher weighted objectives like operational excellence and customer intimacy. Now I want to spend a couple of minutes talking about the strategy map. Again, I refer you back to the mags and our own website, pm2.ca, for more detail on how to build a strategy map. But in terms of using the strategy map as a component of scenario planning, there's a couple of important things I think you need to recognize. Thing one is we need to make sure that the strategy map is general enough and specific enough at the same time around the scope of business that you're doing. So many decisions that you need to surface during a scenario planning activity have multiple levels of detail. Let's say, for example, it's something simple. You want to do some scenario planning around buying a new house. Well, there may be some major issues that you're concerned about. Does it have a garage? Does it have a fireplace? Does it have air conditioning? But there's a million small questions as well. If it has air conditioning, how efficient is it? Is it through forced air or is it outside rads? A whole bunch of detail. What we need to do is answer the big questions first. And once you've got those answered, then drill into the detail. One of the problems that we often see in scenario planning is we want to drill down every issue to infinite detail. So now instead of saying, does it have a garage or not, we're going to be asking multiple questions about the garage. Does it have wiring? Is it insulated? Do the doors work? How well do they work? Are they louvered doors or roll-up doors and so forth? And although those things are important, at that overall big picture, do I choose this house to be in the short list or not? I probably don't need that level of detail. So it's difficult to make sure that the strategy map is general enough that it lets you deal with the big picture issues in scenario planning, but not so specific that you get bogged down in the details. So let's imagine that you now go from 25 house alternatives on your list down to the top 5. Now I might want to drill into the next level of detail to find some of the differentiators. It's the same thing with scenario planning. Start off with a big picture, answer the big picture questions, then move to the next level of detail. I know that's a bit tough for all of us because we have this propensity to drive to the detail, but if you can do that, it will work out well. So this one strategy map you're looking at on the screen may work for the big picture questions. when I get into more detail, I may have to do a drill down or cascaded strategy map that drills into the objectives like I1, operational excellence, I3, pursue customer intimacy, maybe I2, continuous innovation, and possibly supplier of choice, C1, to get more detail, of course, and leverage technology, to make sure that the next level of detail of the strategy map provides the right level of detail around those issues. So on the attached spreadsheet, you now need to begin entering in the strategic objectives and the weightings. So in columns B, you enter in the strategic objectives, and column H, you're going to write in the weightings that you have agreed to. It looks a bit like this. So this is what the spreadsheet looks like. There are 3 tabs on it. The case scenario that we've already completed with the sample data that we'll be reviewing during the rest of this webinar. There's also a tab that has a blank spreadsheet, but I've locked the cells so you don't accidentally change any of the formulas, and so this is a pretty safe one to play around with. And then finally there's a blank one that's unlocked so that you can go ahead and change formulas and add in columns and all that sort of stuff, because ultimately you'll probably need to tweak this to suit your needs. For this webinar, we're going to be focusing in on the case scenario, and in particular we're going to start off in this top right hand corner over here where we can be inputting the strategic objectives and weightings. So right now in column B, you can put in the strategic objectives from your strategy map, and in column H, you can put in the weighting that you've chosen to use.